Welcome to One Sharp Sword, cutting through to what matters most. I'm Dr. Wayne Pernell, your host, your guide on this journey. I'm known as the Outfluencer, and I'm also known as the Powerful Presence Mentor. Today is a special day. I have an amazing guest. I'm so excited. This gentleman, I'm going to grab my glasses. This gentleman has been doing his magic for over 2.5 decades in sales, in relationship management, in business development, in leadership coaching. He is known as the master connector, which is kind of awesome.
Kind of
He's
badass. I like it.
kind of badass. Yeah. He's a keynote speaker, a best-selling author, and he owns a business called Thrive. He's the host of a podcast you may have heard of called Thrive Loud, and his name is Lou Diamond. And I'm so happy, Lou. Thanks for joining me. This is awesome.
Dr. Wayne, I am even more excited than you are to be here today. So thank you for
That's
having me.
possible.
Truly a pleasure.
Truly is a pleasure. Thank you. So here's how this usually works, and my listeners have this. What I like to do is I like to get a little bit more of your background. I've given the very basic. We talk about, because this is one sharp sword, it's about cutting through to what matters most, which means that usually what happens along the way is that you've had to cut out what doesn't matter.
Hmm.
So you've been on this success journey, and success journeys are never smooth. It's never a direct line. Oh, I think I'll head there, right? So along the way, you've had to define yourself, redefine yourself. You've made mistakes and learned from them because you're still here. No tigers ate you. No, right? You didn't burst into flames or melt into a puddle.
The day is young. Day is young.
That's true. And if you did, right? So somehow you recovered from that. So talk to us about what's been your journey, what got you into leadership development and the kind of coaching that you do, and what landed you in the space of podcasting, where tens of thousands of people are listening to you all the time.
It's really interesting that you described it as a success journey because I want to draw a comparison, or actually more importantly, maybe whatever the opposite of a comparison is. It's like the antithesis. You ever notice that the news only focuses on the bad news? I mean, we're in an interesting time right now where,
Sure.
you're seeing the stories of people protesting, and they focus on the rioting and the looting because that's the thing that gets the news, the fire versus the message that's being delivered. And more often than not, because bad news gets the attention, the rubbernecking thing, that when it relates to what we see on TV, that message is always got to be shifted to the bad side. And that's all you see is the bad side. But meanwhile, there's a lot of good behind it. Well, I think success journeys are funny because they're called success journeys because we see someone as a success or we see the wins that they have. But make it clear, the wins don't happen without a tremendous number of failures along the way, because that's the only way you learn. And I always find my favorite line is, they're an overnight success. Well, make it clear, everyone's night overnight is just when they turned on the radar to recognize somebody.
Sure.
There's still plenty of people who have no idea who I am, but there's plenty that are starting to, and you have to start somewhere. And every day I face failures and losses and mistakes. And those are the things that you take and learn and try to grow with.
That's awesome.
So I want to make it clear that, the success story is rooted with potholes along the way. But without them, it would be kind of boring. I play golf. I play golf, Dr. Wayne, and I love the game because it's exactly that. Like, you can hit a gazillion bad shots, but what you'll remember is that one shot that brought you back.
Yeah.
And it's about learning from those mistakes along the way. So, in my career, you were talking about where it all began, or where would you like me to start, I guess, is really a question, because there's so many avenues to
I
go.
was born so let's not start there. Let's well, here's the thing is, it's I think that's really important to point out that a success journey really is typically an ugly success journey, right? That most of us that are out there, w- we see other people's highlight reels, right? So
Right.
I talk about it as comparisonitis, which is inflammation. Itis is inflammation, and so comparisonitis is inflammation of the comparison gland,
Yeah. Sure.
and and we need to stop that, right? So we look at our journey, and you've had a journey of success, complete with potholes, complete with failures, skin knees. You've gotten back up. So I think the big thing for me is at one point I listened to the CEO of Hay House when he
Mhm.
was speaking. This was years ago, and he said, "At some point, you decide
Yeah.
to be famous. At some point, you decide, right? And you make this decision." And it was at that point, it was, well, I am deciding to be an author, and now I have 5 books out there. You At some point, Lou, you decided that you were going to help others in their leadership journey. You
Yeah.
decided at some point to get a microphone, and then a better microphone, and then a better microphone, right? To create
Yes.
the podcast that you have. Talk about that journey, right? When did you decide that, you know what, I'm actually good at connecting with people and connecting people to people? And actually, before you start, I want to give this amazing quote that you told me the other day.
Oh,
You said, this is a Lou Diamond quote.
I want to
When you
hear this.
connect, when you connect, you thrive.
Yeah.
That's flipping awesome, because that is the core message that you've kept throughout. So at what point did you flip the switch and go, I'm going to be the connector?
I have to say that I've always you're always there's something about you, your superpower that you all have. And to your point, it's when did I flip the switch to uncover it and unleash the superpower beast onto the world? And that happened after a long time on Wall Street. I knew I was unhappy. I just didn't know why, because my whole life I've been a genuinely happy person. And success did not necessarily equate to happiness. Recently, Wayne, they've been doing these things where they show this, like, here, show a picture of you 10 years ago. Remember
Mhm.
those? They were going around
Right.
social media. I never posted this because it was really interesting, because I look way better today than I did 10 years ago, physically, spiritually, the energy that comes from me. And that comes from the fact that I am living and breathing my passion each and every day. I am, as I love to say on my podcast, I'm thriving loud. And that happened after working on Wall Street for a while. And two avenues collided. One was, I knew the business around me was changing, and I was trying to find a place where I can be. But there was another thing. I had been recognized internally for so long as an important cog in this particular organization. And I had received one of the highest levels of those 360-degree scoring things they do, those HR surveys. I get called into, like, one of the most senior people in the entire company, because they wanted to understand why I had scored so well with all the people that reported underneath me, that reported to me, and vice versa, the ones that I reported to. Why was there such a high bar of what I was doing? And that coincided with something that happened and where my business was leading. A longtime colleague and friend of mine had been going to a trade show, and I basically was moonlighting, Wayne. Uh, he asked me if I could come with him to this trade show while I was still working on Wall Street. And I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next, because I just knew I was not happy, but I had not necessarily said, now I'm ready to unleash my one sharp sword.
Nice.
I I knew that he invited me out to this trade show, and I just said, "Oh, this will be fun." And heard what he did. I knew what problem he solved, but he had been going to this trade show for 6 previous years and had found it to be not the most successful wait time for him, but he needed to be there. Like a lot of these businesses you need to go to. In the 2.5 days we were there, he inked 2 deals, like signed right there while we were there. And within a 30-day window, 5 other clients had come in. And it was very clear that that was going to happen from the way that I was helping him connect
Mm.
at this particular event. And I was working with him, but also connecting to people that he'd already known or people that he'd never met. And he, on the flight back, uh, he bought me a drink on the plane, or might have been included. I can't remember that part. We weren't sitting in first class, that's for sure, but we were sitting next to each other. We may have gotten like extra leg room. And we're flying back. He bought me a cocktail. And he said to me, "Do you know what it is that you do? Because I don't believe that you do know what you do, and that you do something that is so unique that you need to tell the world about it, because I have never seen anyone do it the way you do it. And I think that is something that you need to share with the world." That was when I wrote Master the Art of Connecting, sort of in between my ears at that point. And then it eventually became the book. And that then led me to realize that I was very good at taking these unique skills, which I call, by the way, your connecting core. These are the muscles that you have, Wayne, that when you tap into and you flex and you embrace them, you have the ability to thrive, connect to thrive.
Are
Exactly.
they are these muscles available to anybody,
The
or is
best
it
part of great
the
question.
Lou Diamond's special sauce, or this is something that because it's muscles we all have, we just need to learn how to use them?
So it took me a while. What I was doing was doing what I do on my podcast show, which I'll bleed to after this part of the conversation because it is important, is that I needed to decode myself and what exactly was this thing that I do, the way that I connect to people. And the way that I connect to people is how I see the world. And I wrote this down in the book because, and not everyone sees it. Look, I look at you, Wayne, right now, and I see you. We're looking on a video piece, and believe it or not, I not only see how charming and handsome looking you are, but I also see, this lovely. I got the story of the background. I know you're in the house that you grew up in, that your father built. I know your books. I know from where we sat the last time and the last time we chatted, the
Yes.
publications you've had. You were just in a kitchen with your 94
Eight,
year old your
98.
98-year-old amazing father, God willing, God bless him, who seemed, still sharp as a tack. And I got to see that. But when I see you, I see all of those visual assets behind you, all of those things that are associated with you, where you live, where your house is, what your things, and who you are as a brand. And obviously the association of having visually seen you helps a lot. And I take those assets and I look at that as your world. And you want to connect to somebody else, whether it's one individual, whether it's to another company, whether it's to an audience, whether it's your brand and a message to the entire globe, if it was something you really wanted to. How do you get your world to connect to other worlds? And it turns out that the art of connecting is coachable and trainable, and are specific things that tap into those connecting core muscles that enable you to more easily connect with someone else and bring those worlds, your world, my world, your listeners, your readers' worlds together. That connection, the ability to do that, the ability to understand what it takes to connect with someone, because it's not always the same formula every time. Sometimes it might be a communication in the way that you begin to connect, a conversation. It might be the way you need to be when you're with someone. You may have to overcome something that you're afraid of to be able to connect with someone. All of those things represent some of the muscles in what I call the connecting core that you can work and strengthen each and every day. And when I figured out that that was the thing that I did differently than other people, and that's why people liked working for me or why people liked having me work for them, I recognized that I could be most effective, most powerful, and achieve the most connection by going off on my own and sharpening that sword every single day. and enabling and empowering businesses, top leaders, top brands in messaging so that they can connect using this formula of strengthening your connecting core.
You have a way about you, and it's partly your voice, which says no, and
No,
it's
I'm laughing because you're going to hear a piece about how important your voice
yes.
is. It's part of one of the messages that I have, but continue. I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, that's awesome. This is right. This is I work with Roger Love, who's the #1 voice coach in the world, right? So um, when I first started years and years ago, I sounded kind of nasal, and then to stop that from happening, I sounded really bass, right? So everything was here.
There's nothing wrong with that yet.
Roger says if you start in the basement, you got nowhere to go.
Yeah.
So right, so I learned how to use this instrument. Well, your voice says there's something about its resonance that says, I see something in you.
Yeah.
That and that is the way you use that instrument is I see something in you, and it makes people lean in, which is fantastic.
While I cannot sing that well, we all know that when we hear a voice in someone that sings so amazingly, it draws you in, and you're connected to the uniqueness of the sound of that voice. There is something in our voice, the way that we connect. It is an integral part, but it doesn't have to just be a voice. I know some people who don't have very good voices, but connect incredibly. It's how you use the instrument of what you need to do to connect. Sometimes we don't even need our voice to connect. In fact, one would argue it's opposite. Obviously, I'm the guest on your show here, and one of the best gifts that you have is that you're listening right now more than you're talking. I'm speaking more than you are in this thing as the guest on your show. That empowers you is one of the things that enables you to connect is the ability to listen. One of the muscles is the power of empathy and the ability to step into the shoes of another and see things from their world and understand what their world is all about. And when you step into those shoes in the power of empathy, that muscle, you cannot do that effectively without listening with our ears, with our eyes, with our soul. We listen and connect this way. It's a little bit more powerful. We have a lot more receivers, if you would, that can pick up the way we want to connect with someone. I encourage lots of your listeners, if they're ever on an initial sales call or an initial meeting when you're trying to hire somebody, which is still a sales call, you're just selling your firm versus selling a product, to make sure that you see the person you see there, because not only will you be able to judge things by how you hear them, but the way they react, the way they look, the way they see, how comfortable they are in communicating about themselves, asking questions, all the things, because make it clear, if you're going to hire another salesperson, you know that that person has to sit and communicate a message to someone else. So if you're connecting with them, gosh darn it, they better be able to connect with you. So, and be able to connect with others. So these things can be worked on. And what's so unfortunate is that because of so many things that make our lives easier, electronic communication, chat, texting, the internet, Slack, this and that, we will go to the fastest and easiest thing and sometimes miss out on the most important way that we might need to connect with someone. And that is on the level that they can relate to. So I work with lots of companies to make sure they do that, whether it's your image, whether it's your message. You have to ask that question. It's one of my favorite ones, and I ask it often. Hey, this was great meeting you. What's the favorite way that you want to continue our conversations? Do you want to do this via Zoom? Do you want to do this on a phone call? We hope very soon. Would you like to do this over coffee?
Mm-hmm.
These are the things you need to do because it is so important in that muscle of empathy to step into their world, not yours. Not say, oh, come on to my office and check this out, or let me tell you what I think. That doesn't connect to people. You have to connect on their level and understand what matters most to them.
This is fantastic. It resonates with everything that I believe. It resonates with everything this show is about in terms of cutting through, in terms of finding what matters most. in the manner in which you do it, where you're saying step into yourself, own yourself,
Yeah.
so that you can hold someone else. Um, this is interesting. I had an interview recently. This isn't on this podcast yet. I'm hoping to do this, and it was with a police officer.
Hmm.
And what he said was, "We get trained into apathy." And that is the cause of a lot of problems out there. And I think
I didn't know we were going to go down this avenue of this show, but you're not wrong. Yeah, there is a listening mechanism and an empathetic mechanism that has to happen, because you're right. Uh, Due to the extreme situations that could happen, they need to be apathetic in some instances, not in all.
yes,
But
I
yeah,
mean,
I
that's
do
the
understand that.
balance. That's the huge balance, is I have to do my job and put myself out there, and so there's a personal protective apathy that they have to
Yeah.
wear. And what you were saying, and I think it's been the thrust of the movement I started, called Starts With One, which
Yeah.
is, I see you, dear human, I see you, right? And we begin to lift another, just one person at a time. Well, when you're doing your sales work, when you're doing your leadership work, when you're training an entire team, you're saying, turn on the empathy,
Yep.
right? Let your mirror neurons that are in your frontal lobes, let them fire as big as they can fire, so that you can learn as much about the other person as you can.
It's so funny. One of my favorite. Can I share the story just of the
We
worst
got
the worst sales pitch that ever happened? I love sharing the story. So a client that had hired me, uh, we had this really good meeting. Uh, they had this really good meeting lined up with a new client, and they said, "Listen, our one of our best salespeople got this meeting. We want to bring our tech team out, and it's on site. It's today. Would you be able to go? We would love you to be a fly on the wall, kind of be like, part of the team." And I said, "Absolutely." And selfishly I did, because I actually was curious to see how this team was connecting or not with their targets and how it went. So the CEO and the head of sales sent me off with these 3 or 4 people. We go to this meeting, and we entered the meeting. And Wayne, sometimes I just sat there and listened. I don't believe I even, aside from saying my name and hello, and I'm a special consultant working with these guys. I just watched them um, do their thing and see how things would go. And the meeting ended. And after the meeting ended, we were heading back into the car, heading back to the office for where we were driving to. And it was so confusing to me, because there was chest bumping, high fiving, fist pumping, uh, absolute, how that was the greatest presentation we ever had. This was awesome. Oh my God, this was spectacular. And they said, "Lou, what did you think? Do you agree, right? That thing went great." And there were two thoughts that went through my head. One, was I in the same meeting as these individuals? And two, I have a lot of work to do. Because not once during this meeting did these people make it about the client.
Yeah.
They basically put on a great performance of their capabilities, of what they can do, of what their firm's technology was, and the best PowerPoint or whatever version of whatever they showed back and forth. By the way, they never asked any questions in the beginning. They never really inquired as to what the needs were of the client. They never specifically drove down and figured out how they could solve a problem for that client. But most importantly, when the meeting ended, they never asked for the business.
Mhm.
They just kind of did like a song and dance and left. So, from a song and dance point of view, if that's the entertainment that you paid and signed up for, great. But it was very unclear as to where things went. And the thing that went through my head at that point was, why did these people believe that this was an effective way to sell to someone else, to communicate, to connect to another person? And I realize that what happens often is that if we have something that's so good, and by the way, this technology is amazing, and this service and what these guys do for clients is great, that sometimes you could be stuck inside your own world so often that you forget that there's another world outside there. And if you take that for granted, you're going to miss out on exactly the reason that this whole business probably had started in the first place, and helping somebody else's needs, as opposed to then figuring out their innovative ways to do things. Make it clear what makes people thrive when they connect is that if this particular company had connected with this other client, they would have worked together and created something even bigger, even better, a more amazing solution based on what these guys had, because they were only thinking about themselves. They were not recognizing that by partnering and connecting with that other target, that the combination of those two worlds coming together would be more money for them, great opportunity for this client, and other clients that would benefit from the work of these two groups getting together and connecting and making things stronger. It is that forgetfulness that people have. It keeps me busy, Wayne,
That's
and
awesome.
makes me put it up there. But it was a lot of work, and they're doing better. I'll make that clear. They haven't made that presentation in quite some time.
I think that's awesome. I think the exponential growth that people can get when they are choosing to listen,
Yeah.
choosing to collaborate. I when I do coaching of marketing folks, and I'm sure you've gotten your share of uh, people are trying to reach you on LinkedIn, and hey, I saw your profile, and here's what I can do, and here's what I can do. The reminder that I give people is this is like dating. So if you said, hello, I'm so great, I'm wonderful, I have this, I do that, me, your chance of getting a second date is going to be about zero.
Yeah,
Right.
Wayne, dating, business development, interviewing and hiring, internal meetings, and improved communication are all connecting. There's
Yeah,
no difference.
it's all connected.
The skills and the muscles that you use in the connecting core that I talk about can be carried over into any one of these mediums. It is how effectively you use it in each one of them, and the language you may use that's different. Because obviously, your dating situation, make it clear. Listen, listen to what someone has to offer, and that listening, and this will bleed over to what you asked about. All of this work of helping people thrive and helping them connect uh, gets really summarized in the way that I behave as the host of the Thrive Loud podcast show.
Hmm.
Because Thrive Loud is about moving onward and upward and taking things to a new level and featuring those that are thriving in their lives, their businesses, and their passions. So I am, just as I was decoding myself and trying to figure out what was the superpower of this connectedness and this connecting core and the ability to want to connect to thrive, it's decoding what is that guest's superpower, asking the questions that will really uncover something about them that will help other people connect to them, know what matters in their world, understand it. It's basically like opening up their world. If they were like a snow globe, it would be like taking the globe off and letting anybody play in their dancing space for a while. And that's what the show is about. And I wanted it to be emblematic, I think that's the right word, of what I do with the clients that I work with. And that's, something that is important and makes it fun, and which is why the show's done well, I guess, and why it's a passion project, or what is it, a passion project or a passion of love? One of the two
It's
that continues to grow. And that's some of the stuff we do.
nice. All right. So there's a statistic that says that about 17% of men are condescending and never know it, that they don't have the ability to recognize when they're being condescending. And I don't know if there's a statistic out there for women, but I assume that there's some kind of parallel, if not as high as 17%. My question to you then, Lou, is empathy trainable?
Oh, yes. Oh, not even a question. The
Yeah,
reason
good
why,
question. I just asked it. No.
yeah, no, empathy is a great question. It is absolutely, it is coachable. Like, the joke used to be like, can you teach someone to sell? And I don't know what camp I'm in there. I don't know if you can train someone the art of actually selling in the process. Like, some people have it. But the ability to connect is coachable. And embedded in the ability to connect is one of the most coachable elements, which is empathy. And that is the ability to listen to others. And in fact, in one of the tactics that's really important in any meeting, you've probably seen this in some negotiation terms. Usually, whoever speaks first is losing the negotiation. So, listening and asking questions, and if you have two really good coaches in a meeting, you could have literally like endless questions back and forth that almost could get you nowhere. So, having a real good flow of asking exhausting enough questions to then start a conversation. My
Mhm.
very good friend, who's also a speaker, and I look up to, is one of the, like they always say, pick mentors that are older and younger. Well, I picked the one who's younger because he's just a rock star. His name is Phil M. Jones. You probably heard about him. He's a great speaker. He wrote the book Exactly What to Say, and he has this philosophy that I believe: you ask great questions that start conversations that build relationships with the people you do business with. And I'm a proponent of that camp, and using different terms as he does, but the whole question asking, storytelling, if you would, is the way I like to think about it. Ask your questions and then tell the story that relates to the answers to those questions will make you a more effective, empathetic person.
That's awesome. And it's done in the spirit of how do I lift this person versus how do I use their answer to get me to my next? Because I think
Yeah.
it can be very manipulative. Let me
Uh,
find out, right? So,
Well, if you use it manipulatively, here's the difference. You may be able to win in that one instance. You may be able to get that. But after you've felt that you've been used and you haven't established a strong enough connection, the way I'll use it is you might get the circles to touch of the two worlds that you represent, but they will not be linked. And in fact, when you do that once, and if you act inauthentically, one of the other muscles is authenticity. And
nice.
if you do not act authentically and you're acting only in your self-interest in those points where you take advantage of someone, that's disingenuous. And what are the odds of you connecting with that person in the future if that's the way you are? Because you will always remember that. You will always remember when somebody did that. And so, yeah, maybe it gives you the short win for now, but it's not going to give you the longer term game. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And relationships and business relationships, what might pay over years and years of doing great business, as we all know, comes from really great empathetic relationships with the people you do business with.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's so key. The idea that relationship building is the marathon and not the sprint.
Right.
That it's, the chest bumping and fist bumping and all that, the high fives, that comes from the short-term win. And it comes from, looking in the
Yeah.
mirror, look at us, look at what we did, look, don't I look great? Versus, wasn't that a great connection? Didn't we make something happen?
Uh, in fact, one would argue that you connect faster when the connection is there right away and you have that relationship. People want to do business with you, people want to seek you out. In fact, one would argue, instead of being that proactive person that needs to reach out and try and get to connect with all these different people, those that are master connectors, those that know how to embody their superpowers of truly owning how those muscles of the connecting core work, become so strong that people are drawn to them, almost like a big planet that brings the gravitational force, pulls them in. You want to be connected with that person who walks in the room and has that sense of all the things going on. We all do. I love to use this expression. I speak about this often. Nobody wants to connect with a dud. We all want to connect with somebody with vibrance and energy. You talked about connecting your voice. Just to break this out, I speak about this often. I break the letters of the word voice down into an element of how you can move along and the way you need to be in maximizing what I call the connect working world, which is vision, opportunity, identity, compassion, and energy. And each one of those letters are things that you need to map out in how you can go connect faster with people. And those last two, compassion and energy, you have to have that compassionate feeling for others. It's something that you will want to connect with. But most importantly, you got to have a pulse. You got to lift your game up a little bit. You got to have a little energy when you're going to go connect, because it is work. it is work to want to open yourself up. It is work to step into the shoes of another. It is work to really go out there. You can't just always be with yourself by yourself and how you need to be and just assume that's how people are going to work. No, it's a constant understanding of asking those questions and wanting to do that. And when you recognize the power that when you do that, and now you've brought someone into your world, and now you're both kicking on both cylinders and you're both thriving, boom, that is where the magic happens. And that is the type of relationships where everybody thrives.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Then the piece of all of those, when you bring all of those together, it's about alignment as well.
Yeah.
Because you can't show up and go, hey, I'm compassionate, it's
Doesn't sound so good, right?
no, right?
I'm very authentic.
Exactly. That's right. I just my dad shared a saying that we were talking about business. We were talking about how his business grew, and at some point before he goes, he's 98. Before he goes, I should get him on.
Do that. Hang up with me and go talk with the
Do
man
that
right
now.
now.
Yeah, exactly.
Just don't wait.
He shared this thing that he learned along the way. He goes, sincerity is so important, whether you mean it or not. And he was being facetious,
right?
but it's so important to recognize that those were some of the things that people grew up with. It's like, be nice was a thing, right. And it's like, well, be empathetic, right? Have empathy, understand the other person, right? That's what it all comes down to.
And look, unfortunately, this is for another podcast, but we're built to be about ourselves because that's just who we are. We have to protect ourselves, like we have to look out for ourselves. There are things about that. But that isn't what makes us really great. We know that it's the power of more than one, right?
Yeah.
The power of your family, the power of being with your loved ones, the power of a really strong relationship, the power of a great team. It's when all that comes together that we all see that magic and recognize it. You see it in sports all the time. As great as Michael Jordan is and his incredible performance, he didn't start winning until he started elevating the others around him. That great sports show, The Last Dance, was awesome. I just finished watching it. Really good. So anyway.
Nice.
Well, hopefully this was helpful. One sharp sword, man. I like that.
Right. And the idea of that is that people get worn out when they try and use 1,000 dull knives.
That is spot on. I like that. That.
And so it's like 1,000 dull knives, and you're going to try and get through what? No, one sharp sword cutting through to what matters most.
Yeah. And I think what's also important is that sharpest sword can't cut its own handle, which means that if it wants to shave and get sharp, it needs help from somebody else in an outside perspective. You need that outside view to make sure that you stay sharp. My colleagues, I have a leadership, a mind meld group. I don't even call it like a mastermind. It's a mind meld group. I feel like we all get on the same page. We all learn from each other. I learn from other podcasters. I listen to what great stuff they do. I learn from other business leaders and my clients every day of innovative ways that they can go really extend their game and their brand and their products. And I'm always trying to be additive. A lot of yes and conversations, which I know you're familiar with. But
yes.
That component of, hey, you're one sharp sword. I'm sure the reason this show thrives is because you got amazing guests on here that really add to your piece, but with a great host. So it totally works.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It helps to thrive loud. So as long as we're bouncing back and forth, we are coming to the end of our time. Is there anything else? This has been a fast segment, at least from where I'm sitting. This is fantastic. So what else would you share? You've given so many tidbits and solid nuggets, and a couple of things. What last piece of wisdom would you leave the listeners with, and also where do they find you?
So I'll do the where do you find me, and then I'll give the wisdom. They can find me anywhere in social media at Thrive Loud, ThriveLoud. You could find me at thriveloud.com. That's where the podcast can be. And you could obviously find anything about me as a speaker, or how we help our clients at Thrive connect to Thrive. So all those places that you can go there, and that's the way to find me. Uh, message for your listeners, and especially at the time that we're recording this. This is early June, when we're dealing with a lot of unrest everywhere, and between COVID-19 and where the economy is dipped with, and people being in isolation, and these terrible acts that happened up in Minnesota, and all the ensuing difficult conversations and things that are there. I want to use this. Conversations matter.
Mm.
Have the conversations. I just recently had a conversation with Tony Chapman, a good friend of mine, a Black man in New York, talking to a white guy, myself, having the conversation about these issues that are taking place. I think it's so important. Whenever there are issues, these conversations are so good. No different than the message I shared about how Phil Jones shares. Listen, you know, ask great questions that start conversations. Ask the questions to have the conversation, because that's what will elevate all of us. So whether it's a great podcast like your program, mine, or anything out there, listen to these conversations, because they're powerful and we learn from them. And the more that you start having the conversation, the more you start to connect with others too, because it brings you together and dives into that empathy and that ability to connect with others. So that would be my takeaway message for today. I don't know if that's wisdom. I think it just, to me, feels like common sense.
I'm gonna allow that to be the mic drop. That's awesome. Lou Diamond, master connector, host of Thrive Loud. Find him and everything else about him at thriveloud.com. Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining me. This is
Dr. Wayne Pernell. Thank you for having me on today. Great to share with and connect with your audience.
Really, really appreciate it. This is One Sharp Sword, cutting through to what matters most.